Lewis, what's your assessment of how this is going to work? I mean, particularly with your experience, the benefits or otherwise, perhaps, of what this could mean for Rwanda?
Well, I think it's a highly transactional response to the refugee crisis in the UK, and essentially you're putting the responsibility on another country. Now, the problem here is that Rwanda, while it has a very good record at development and a very good record at relative economic prosperity, and it's an accessible place, at least for foreign visitors, and something of a favorite among certain sort of rock stars in the aid and development industry, it has an appalling human rights record. It ranks with 22 points out of 100, for instance, on Freedom House's index on political freedoms, which puts it in about the same space as Russia, for instance. Now, you wouldn't be sending your refugees to Russia to see them catered for and cared for. So why, you would ask, are you sending them to Rwanda? And I think the answer is simply that the Rwandese are willing to have them, they're willing to process them, and they're willing to do so because they're getting £120 million in return. And it seems, I think, frankly, a way of shifting the blame to another place, to another country, or shifting the problem, should I say, rather, and rather than having to deal with it at source. And you really, to deal with the refugee crisis, and particularly the refugee crisis from sub-Saharan Africa, which is responsible for most refugees in the world today, not most of those coming to the UK, by the way, but you have to really deal with it at source. And dealing with it at source means essentially improving the political conditions in the countries that are supplying these refugees to enable the economies, in turn, to ensure conditions of prosperity.
But even if there was a concentrated effort to do just that, it would take time. And I guess Priti Patel needs to deal with this migrant problem at the moment, straight away. The deterrent value, surely, of knowing that you could, if you try and enter Britain illegally, you could be sent to Rwanda with, as you said, a very dodgy human rights record. Doesn't that just increase the deterrent value?
I'm not sure if it does. I think people are probably, the push factors on refugees are probably great enough that they will regardless take a chance. I mean, these are people fleeing terrible conditions, whether they be terrible economic conditions or political repression. They probably suffice to push them to the UK or to somewhere better in Europe. And I think the hazardous nature of the journeys that they're willing to undertake is an illustration of that desperation. So I'm not sure if the possibility of them ending up in Rwanda will be a deterrent. I think it's just simply shifting the problem elsewhere on the part of the UK. And I do think there is a moral question here, which is these are people who have obviously fleeing conditions, and they may just be in search of a better life, but certainly a safer life. And then essentially you're putting them into a place whereby they may not, in fact, be experiencing the conditions for a better life or a safer life at all. And I really don't believe it has a deterrent value among people who are this desperate.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, isn't it? But I mean, why do you think Rwanda has been picked for this? I mean, it is. I mean, certainly regarded in some respects as pretty ruthless, but I mean, it's a pretty efficient country, isn't it?
Yeah, Rwanda's always been a pretty efficient country. Even before this particular regime, it was always seen as one by the donor community that was well run and squared away. But I think it's been selected because it is so accessible. It has become something of a donor darling, a bit of a celebrity amongst donor ranks. And it's become a strategic partner in that sense because it's supplied peacekeeping troops around the region, most recently further south in Mozambique, for instance. It's seen as a very efficient place that is well run. But it's not well run on standards that I think the UK and its voting public would recognize. It's run on standards of authoritarianism. And I think the reason why it's been selected here is A, because it's accessible to outsiders, and B, because the UK, and in particular the Conservative parties, had something of a special relationship with Rwanda, going back at least 15 years. And I think that the Rwandans, of course, want the money. They want the international interaction. They want the diplomatic protections that this offers, in spite of their political system at home. And it suits them. It's a highly transactional relationship in that way. But I do think you have to ask, does it make the problem go away of refugees? Does it make the source dry up? And the answer is no. And over the long term, I do think you have to ask about what sort of political and ethical behavior are you encouraging in Africa if you're willing to do deals like this with a regime that is patently unfree and unfair in political terms.
Okay, Dr. Greg Mills, good to talk to you this morning.